Well, good morning, everyone, or indeed good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. Thanks very much for joining us here for this webinar. I have the privilege to be Brainjuicer's juicy evangelist. So my many responsibilities include sharing some of Brainjuicer's new research thinking, and hopefully today it'll provide some food for thought as we spend the next 30 to 45 minutes talking about me to we research. I'd like to open a little unconventionally perhaps by telling you a quick story about Swedish drivers. Now in Sweden, learner drivers have to undergo an incredibly rigorous driving test. There's a slippery road test, which involves 4 hours of theory and practical driving exercises in slippery conditions, a theory test of 65 questions, which requires a pass rate of 80%, and this can only be scheduled after you've taken 14 pre-tests, and finally, there's a 45-minute driving test, which of course involves various car maintenance issues as well. So by the time you qualify as a Swedish driver, it's hardly surprising that you think you're rather good. But it is actually the case that some 50% of Swedish drivers believe themselves to be in the top 10% of Swedish drivers. Now obviously, with a basic grasp of statistical reality, you'll realize that that quite simply can't be the case. However good they are, half of them cannot be in the top 10%. Further evidence, if it were required, of how human beings can sometimes delude themselves in this way is the statistic that 90% of French men believe themselves to be in the top 10% of French lovers. Now, as a Brit, I'm happy to accept that of all lovers in the world that might be the case, but again, statistically, clearly 90% of French men cannot possibly be in the top 10% of French lovers. So just a couple of examples really of how as human beings we can often be unreliable witnesses to ourselves. One might go so far as to say that we are self-deceit machines. Very often we are very poor witnesses to our own behavior and to our own motivations. Central though, of course, in terms of market research tools, is very much the notion that, the best way to get to the truth is to ask individuals to tell us, what are your opinions? What does motivate you to do this? What will you buy? What will you do? What have you done recently? The central premise is, essentially me research, asking the individual. But as I say, often we can actually be quite flawed in our understanding of ourselves. If I can quote the Scottish poet Robert Burns, "Oh, that God the gift would give us to see ourselves as others see us." And at the same time, all of the latest social science and evolutionary psychology understanding that's developing is showing the degree to which human beings are, a remarkable we species with this incredibly well-developed ability actually to observe others, to quickly assess other people and situations, and to predict other people's future behavior as well. Coming back to the individual, you can see there what looks like an X-ray of Homer Simpson's head and a very small brain in there, perhaps a thought of a donut or two in there, just to demonstrate really we think much less than we think we think. More than anything else, even when we do think, we're rationalizing what we've already decided to do. Benjamin Libet, or Libe, and you can look him up on Wikipedia for more. He was a pioneering scientist on human consciousness, and he demonstrated that a decision can be made in the unconscious part of the brain up to 7 seconds before the conscious mind actually becomes aware of it. quite remarkable. And from Liebe to libido, if you remember the 60s and the movie The Big Chill, and Jeff Goldblum's famous remark that post-rationalization is more important than sex. It's hard to get through the week without a good post-rationalization to explain in apparently rational terms a decision which you made without really thinking about it. I occasionally, for my sins, perform on the comedy circuit, and of course they always say never perform in a place where they still point at aeroplanes. But of course the truth is anywhere can become a place where people point at aeroplanes or anything else, provided you start off with a certain critical mass of people pointing at the sky. This was something that Stanley Milgram demonstrated with his sky pointing experiment. He got researchers to stand on a street corner and observe how people responded. So when there was only a single person pointing in the air, only 40% of passers-by looked up and checked what the person was pointing at. Once Milgram had got 15 people pointing in the air, almost everybody stopped and started looking up. So why is this? Well, again, it kind of comes back to this idea that we are a we species. We are essentially, as human beings, copying machines. We look at what other people are doing and we think, gosh, well, it must be the right thing to do the same. And final proof, if you like, of that, would you wear these shoes if you didn't know that everyone else was? If enough people are into it, perhaps any croc can succeed, if you'll pardon the pun. So here's the thought, really. If people are flawed in terms of their reporting of their own decisions, and sometimes they don't even know, why they've made a decision, why don't we set out to see people as they are seen by others? Why do we insist on still doing me research, asking people for their own motivations and to predict their own reactions and behaviors? Wouldn't it be a fairer depiction of life, of people's attitudes and behaviors, if we framed our research to obtain a more accurate picture of reality, untarnished by our own distorted view of ourselves as individuals? So I'm asking you to imagine a philosophy, if you can, that moves from asking respondents for opinions about themselves to one where we value the individual, but for their judgment and their powers of observation about the world and the people around them. In other words, moving from me research to what you might call we research. And the underlying principle of that then would be that we don't ask people about themselves, we ask them about what they've noticed, what they think, and what they predict about others. So this opens up a whole world of possibility, different ways you can look at things. If we work from the top of the pyramid, the notion of co-creation, so everyone getting together and working together to bounce ideas off each other. Mass ethnography, so the idea that rather than sending somebody in to or probe people on their behavior and why they do a particular thing, instead asking people in general, what do you notice when you're out and about? What do you notice about your fellow man and your fellow woman? Mass anthropology, and finally mass prediction there, so harnessing the power of a crowd to predict what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do for the remainder of this webinar, I'm going to focus on the area of mass prediction. Now, at the heart then of using a we approach to prediction is of course the notion of the wisdom of the crowd. And you can see there James Surowiecki's fine 2004 book, The Wisdom of the Crowds, Why the Many Are Smarter Than the Few. Very interesting book, and one of the first examples he draws out then of the crowd being harnessed to make an accurate prediction is the story of Francis Galton. Now, Francis Galton was a Victorian scientist in the UK, and he was an elitist. He wanted to set out to show that actually the experts were wiser than the crowd. All part of his thesis that not everybody should have the vote, in fact. But he found out the exact opposite. The way he set out to prove that the experts were wiser than the crowd was to have people guess the weight of an ox. It had been killed, it had been dressed, it was there in the marketplace, and he asked each person to give him his guess of how much it weighed. And do you know what? When he averaged the answers from the whole crowd, they came out with 1,197 pounds, just about bang on the actual weight of the ox, and more accurate than the experts that he had got together to tell what the weight was. Now, thanks to Galton's integrity, he was good enough to publish his findings, even though they blew his hypothesis. And whether coincidence or not, democracy came to the country shortly afterwards as well. He did note a number of key principles. It's not just getting a mob together. There are certain things that you need to make the crowd be wise. You need a large number and a good spread of people. They need to be choosing or voting independently, so no conferring. And what's more, and he had to bite the bullet, it has to be faithfully aggregated, so no upweighting of experts and no downweighting of non-experts. And those three core principles in combination allowed the crowd to be wise. Now, Surowiecki goes on to talk about probably the original predictive market, the Iowa electronic market. I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is a market online, online now, perhaps offline previously, but where 500 mainly white middle-aged guys, so not meeting every aspect of the crowd rules, but they're buying and selling shares to predict the results of elections. So across 600 elections over the past 20 years, the Iowa electronic market has been more accurate in the predictions that emerge than the most accurate of polls 3/4 of the time. Now, isn't that remarkable? So opinion polls are the absolute gold standard of me research. We're asking individuals, but we're taking a large sample size, we're doing random sampling, and we're weighting it. But ultimately, of course, we're asking people, what are you going to do? How are you going to vote? And as we know, people will sometimes not want to admit how they're going to vote because they're worried about what the pollster will think of them and various other factors. So quite remarkable that these people trading the crowd combined, the wisdom of that crowd, actually more accurate than the me research approach 3/4 of the time. So we looked at this approach at Brainjuicer and thought, well, hello. We're a market research company, but maybe there's something here. Maybe we can make this work. What we were determined to do was to follow those three key principles that Surowiecki set out. So the diversity of the crowd, large number and good spread of people, people choosing or voting independently, so no conferring, and finally that faithful aggregation, and in other words, not upweighting any individuals based on their alleged expertise or otherwise. So those were the core principles that we built in. Just to share a little bit more about the approach, what we did take from the sort of Iowa electronic market was this notion of actually engaging your judgment. You know, how could we make sure that the crowd was using its judgment and not, if you like, doing me research on us on the quiet, you know, telling us what they would buy, if you like, rather than what they thought the market would go for. So the way that we did that was to say quite simply, you know, imagine here at the top of the diagram we've got 15 different new product ideas that we're researching. So we said to respondents, imagine you owned shares in all these ideas. So very much getting that, you know, that buy-in and getting people's mind in the right space. And then we said the judgments that we want you to make about these product ideas, we want you to judge on the basis of how successful you think they will be in the market. So in other words, putting people into investor mode. We're not interested in whether they'd buy it. We're interested in harnessing the overall wisdom of the crowd as to which ones they think will succeed. So we get people to look at each idea on its own to start with and say, all right then, do you think you'd probably sell shares in this idea because you don't think it will succeed in the market? Or would you probably buy shares in this idea because you think it will succeed? That's quite nice. It gives you, with the probably buy, it gives you a normable benchmark that you can compare between different crowd research exercises. And then we really push it. We say, all right then, here are the ideas you said you'd probably sell your shares in. Which one would you sell all your shares in because you think it is least likely to be successful in the market? So really clear which one of these is the turkey that just isn't going to sell. And then we say, marvelous. Now, what about the ideas that you said you'd probably buy shares in? Which one of those would you double your shares in because you think that it would be most successful in the market again? We also get a full evaluation of why they've said that, which of course is key. But the fundamental thing is you get a net preference score by taking away the sellers from the buyers. So just to sort of give you a quick feel for what the output looks like here. Here's a predictive market done with 7 concepts being tested. And you can see here already a dramatically clear picture you get. So in the green for each concept, that is the percentage of the crowd who doubled their shares in that idea, saying, I think this one will be most successful in the market. And then you can see in the red the people who were selling their shares in that idea. And you can see very clearly then for concept 1 an awful lot of people doubling their shares in that concept. Some people selling, 9%, but still if you look at the blue number on top of the green, then that is the net preference score, quite simply taking the red away from the green. So that's one where we give it a sort of a marketing recommendation button, a fast forward there at the bottom, and then you can see that the following 2 concepts, which we have down as a sort of a play, in other words, yes, go ahead and develop it, because again you can see, a good strong number of people who are doubling their shares, 19% for concept 2 and 17% for concept 3. And you can see as well then, how it works out towards the bottom, the 2 concepts, concept 6, concept 7, that we've said, very much kind of eject from the funnel at this stage, ones where there's been an awful lot of people who've been selling their shares, saying, no, I don't believe this idea will succeed in the market.
I've just been monitoring the questions. We've had a couple of questions that have come up that are quite similar, so I thought it might be a good idea to cover these off right now. One of the questions is quite interesting. In particular, the question is, we've been talking about crowds and how you have to rely on the wisdom of a crowd rather than a target market. But if you've got a target audience who are of a high incidence in the population, is there any reason why you wouldn't just go with that rather than the crowd?
Well, thank you for that question. I think the key thing to making sure that you're harnessing the wisdom of the crowd and harnessing their judgment then about what's going to succeed in the market is very much that you have the crowd in investor mode. And so for that reason, we would say, no, very much you want to have that broad, diverse crowd. Depending on the category, of course, buyers of that category will be present in the crowd to varying or lesser degrees. But fundamentally, it's very much about getting away from, me research and asking people to make that judgment, putting their money where their mouth is with this sort of share buying and using a diverse crowd to do that.
Thanks very much for that. The other question that's popped up a couple of times is, where do we source our crowd from?
Well, primarily, we we conduct this research online using internet panels of people who have indicated they want to take part in market research, panels which meet the guidelines of the appropriate market research monitoring bodies. So sometimes clients want to conduct a concept screening like this in a country where perhaps the incidence of people actually being online is quite low. So in those unusual situations these days, of course, as internet penetration has increased, in those situations we would invite people to a central location, to an internet cafe, and they'd actually do the test online there. So you'd have the advantage that if you're doing multi-country, it's all been administered in the same way. But yes, so we go to panels in the way of ordinary online market research, and we make sure that we invite a broad range of age and gender, absolutely key to getting that diverse crowd that we've talked about, good spread of people, and then we take the first 500 because 500 is a crowd of a sufficient size that it's sufficiently wise. Okay, so if I move on then, just to sort of for reassurance more than anything, I suppose, the question is, all right then, how does this we approach stack up against the traditional me research approach? Monadic testing, of course, being the gold standard for concept testing. In other words, showing the target sample a concept idea on its own without any others, and understanding how likely they are to buy it. We've done a huge number of back-to-back tests to demonstrate how the predictive market approach stacks up against both monadic testing and sequential monadic testing. You'll notice there slightly more against the sequential, because often, of course, due to cost constraints, people have to compromise on the gold standard already because monadic is so expensive. If we have a look, first of all, then, at the monadic results, we have a 91% match in terms of the concepts that were green-lighted by monadic tests and were also concepts that we said, yes, we give that a go-ahead based on what we're seeing in terms of the buying of shares in the predictive market. So there's a small degree of difference. Often, if I can just sort of point out the validation here in the drinks category, the fourth one down there, we gave a 1.5 green lights out of 2 there, and that's where we saw something interesting going on in the predictive market and in the diagnostics that actually said, well, hold on a minute, take a pause actually, because this concept needs a bit of polishing before it goes further. I mean, one of the areas I'd highlight of course is when you do your monadic concept test, unless you're also doing an in-home usage and a volumetric or whatever, you tend to be assessing just trial potential. Whereas when you're asking the crowd, they're taking a view on the overall potential of this idea. So not just, wowee, it's new, I'd buy it once. They're actually saying, how successful is this going to be in the market? So you're also effectively picking up repeat performance as well as trial. You'll see on sequential, again, quite a lot of overlap in terms of the green lights, well, 81% match. The slight difference with monadic, you might well reflect perhaps due to the arguable less accuracy of a sequential approach, but inevitably a compromise that people sometimes find forced on them. Clearly, using a crowd of 500 people, not as expensive as finding a target sample for each concept. So, using the wisdom of the crowd, a very cost-competitive approach.
Coming back in, Will, we've had a couple more questions. I think one of them we've answered with this slide, which was about comparing predictive market results in parallel tests to traditional tests. Just for a bit more context on that, we've conducted to date 280 head-to-heads. This is just a sample from that, but you can see a pretty good overlap with Monadic testing. The other question that's come up as a basis of showing these different categories, got a number of different categories there, is, do you have to stick to just one category or one particular brand when you're testing ideas in a predictive market, or can you test multiple categories or brands? Would you have to split the crowd accordingly to do that? What's your thought on that?
Well, thanks for that question. I mean, essentially, what we tend to see clients do is to use a crowd to evaluate ideas that are within the same broad category. So food ideas not mixed with cleaning products or whatever, personal care products, if they're in that same broad category, we've seen them test them together. I suppose one thing to highlight is if the business decision is to be made between, which of these, basket of quite varied concepts do we proceed with, well then there's some confidence in saying, well, you can get the crowd to look at all of those, because ultimately the crowd is going to be telling you, these are the ones that have the potential in the market. These are the ones that you should proceed with. Just to demonstrate, I already showed you the outputs. So here are the outputs again, the same concepts we were looking at before, with the ones with a lot of trading, a lot of buying in the green there for concepts 1 to 3, a lot of selling for concepts 5, 6, and 7. Just to sort of really point up, I mean, you've probably already sensed, you get a very clear picture between concepts 1, 2, and 3, where these are very strong, people are buying the shares in them, and the weaker ones on the right. What's notable is the difference between this clear kind of decision-making map that you get coming out of the predictive market compared to what the Monadic scores were for these concepts in the equivalent back-to-back test. And you can see we've just plotted on the grey line there what the definitely probably buy scores were in the Monadic test. And you can see, even though clearly what we've seen from the predictive market is that concepts 6 and 7 are, deeply mediocre, if not worse, actually the Monadic still doesn't really pull them out. You can still imagine, can't you, at the board meeting where the champions of concept 6 and 7 would, on the basis of the Monadic test, be saying, well, it's only a few % short, maybe we should stick with it. Of course, the truth is, if you're testing a cheese idea with a targeted audience of cheese eaters, the chances are you're always going to get some people saying, yes, I think I'd buy it, even if there's actually a lack of emotional warmth to the idea. Whereas with the predictive market, because you're engaging that wisdom of the crowd and really getting them to sort the wheat from the chaff, you just get that clarity, and we can say, okay, these are the 3 or 4 concepts that we proceed with and take further down the funnel and develop further. And come on, guys, let's face it, it's time to park those other ones. We've got some really clear feedback here that they are not the ones that have the potential. And you can just see with that yellow line, that's just the plotting of the net preference score, the plotting of those blue numbers which were taking the selling away from the buying. So, really clear, actionable business decision data. I just wanted to pick out one more thing, which is, so far we've said, okay, green light's the same ones as Monadic. It does so, though, in a more discriminating way, so we can see here clearly wheat being separated from the chaff. But I just want to highlight kind of one other aspect that we've seen over the years that we've now been doing this predictive markets approach, and that is the ability of the predictive market to spot potentially breakthrough ideas. So these are ideas which, if you were doing your Monadic test, they'd be lost somewhere in that soup. We just saw the grey line. They'd be somewhere there. They wouldn't be standing out. You'd have a sort of a pretty average purchase intention score. Yet, in a predictive market, you have a look and you say, this is interesting. We've got an idea here. And just to give you the example, this was a predictive market that we did on movies. in advance of their being launched, and we asked people which movie ideas they'd buy their shares in because they thought they'd be most successful at the box office, and which ones they'd sell their shares in because they thought they'd be least successful at the box office. And we showed a concept for each, just like the one that you see there for the inestimable Alvin and the Chipmunks there. And if you look at the results there, we had, I Am Legend, National Treasure, The Golden Compass, lots and lots of people buying shares saying, yes, I think they're going to be successful at the box office, in the market, in other words. Not for me, but for the market as a whole. And we saw here, Alvin and the Chipmunks, although the net preference score is low, it's the 9 people buying, minus the, 9% buying, minus the 8% selling. The net preference score is only 1. But you can see something interesting going on there. You've got the buying, and you've got a lot of selling as well. It tends to be the characteristic that we see, that there's something interesting about ideas like this. Some people are getting it. Some people are getting into it, and other people are saying, no, I don't think that's going to work. And we've tended to find that that sort of polarizing picture in terms of the share trading, but quite a lot of trading going on, that tends to be the characteristic of something that's got niche potential, but quite strong niche potential. So that's why we call it a breakthrough idea. And that's something that the predictive market can pull out, that, as I say, tends not to be so obviously coming through with traditional monadic testing approach. And sure enough, once we'd done this study and we gave time for the movies to actually come out, you can see here, I Am Legend, National Treasure and The Golden Compass did indeed deliver on the potential that our crowd thought in the predictive market they would do. But you can see there Alvin and the Chipmunks then actually delivering on that niche potential and outperforming a couple of the ones that were superficially on top. So we always keep an eye out for that kind of performance and something extra, if you like, that the wisdom of the crowds approach can give you. Now, one other question that we get asked quite a lot is, well, okay then, how far down the road, though, can we go with a crowd before the question, the challenge, the problem that's being put to the crowd is just too much for the crowd to get their head around? A niche industry, a complicated product setup that's being discussed. How far actually can you push it? Now, we were challenged by a large pharmaceutical company with exactly that challenge, and as you'll imagine, quite at the far end of the spectrum of, well, let's see what the crowd can do. So what they'd done, if you look at the left-hand side of the chart, first of all, they had a number of communications concepts for a prescription drug for rheumatism. And so they did what you typically do in pharmaceutical research, and you ask doctors, in this case specifically rheumatologists, you ask them at great expense, you conduct the traditional ME approach, a monadic test showing one concept to each sample of whatever it is, 100 rheumatologists, and you say, how likely is this to persuade you to prescribe this drug to your patients? So they did that. They spent an awful lot of money, but they did find out 3 winning ideas. So we said, all right then, we'll take on your challenge. We will ask our diverse, faithfully aggregated crowd of 500 people. We'll invite them in. We'll explain that these are communications to persuade rheumatologists to prescribe to patients. Which of these communications do you think will be most successful in achieving their aim? We did the same thing. You own shares in all of them. Which would you buy? Which would you sell? And you can see there the remarkable result. It really blew the doors off a pharmaceutical conference last year when it was presented, and rightly so, because as you can see, the crowd, in their wisdom, picked out the same top 3 ideas, but at a tenth of the cost. of doing the research with the sample of rheumatologists. Quite remarkable, and some red faces in the room, certainly at that point. So, dramatic stuff. Just how wise the crowd can be. I suppose the other thing to highlight is that it's not just which concepts have won and which ones haven't, but it's important, of course, to understand why. So I just wanted to show you very briefly, just to sort of reassure on that point, I suppose, and show the rich diagnostics that come out. One of the things that we do is we ask people their emotional response to the concept, so that you get this understanding. Is there surprise? Here for concept A, 10% of people were surprised in the dark green. Who's surprised at this? That tends to be a positive emotion we see. And you can see from the diagnostics, the verbatims, I live alone, I wonder why this hasn't been done before. This is a sort of single portion of a product that was concept A. And you can see an awful lot of happiness there and so on. And of course what you'll find with the ideas where shares are being sold rather than bought is much more kind of contempt, disgust, anger and so on. But just again, tremendous richness coming through by cutting to the emotional response that the crowd has to any given concept. And of course, very important to have a sense of who are we going to target this concept at. So again, we ask, you can see those graphs on the right-hand side of this slide. Who does the crowd think this concept will appeal to? Gender, age group, and even, if appropriate, to ask what the occasion is that it's thought that the product will apply to. And then a couple of other questions to really establish, okay, what's driving the trading of shares in this idea? Have people really got it? Have they understood the main benefit? Have we articulated it as well as we could have? Or indeed, if we missed something that's actually a tremendous benefit that we didn't really appreciate the consumer would see. And finally as well, asking how people would improve the idea as well. So, a really rich harvest of diagnostics, as well as just saying, yep, these are the ones to go with, and no, these are the ones that shouldn't be progressed. So just a brief summary then. Using this we research approach, harnessing the wisdom of the crowd via predictive markets, we've seen proven accuracy when we compare it to monadic testing. We've seen greater discrimination in saying this is clearly the wheat, this is the chaff, these are the ones to proceed with. And 3, finally, that extra sensitivity, if anything, to those breakthrough ideas, those ideas where there's selling but there's buying as well. Hello, there's something interesting going on here. Let's investigate that concept a little bit further. Also, just anticipating, I guess, a question that we often get asked. Well, okay, you've used the wisdom of the crowd's approach for testing new product concepts, but also, can you harness the crowd to tell you about the market potential of other things? And all of the things in this wheel here are things that clients have tested using the predictive market. And I think one of the reasons why we've seen clients who perhaps have used it for concept testing wanting to push it a bit further is because of that value equation. It gets very expensive if, as well as testing your products, you want to also test your claims monadically. If you can harness the crowd, then suddenly you're in a position where you can research this stuff and get a really robust understanding of what's going to be most successful, but also do it at a competitive cost. So that's why you can see all of these things, the crowd having been very successful in pulling out benefits, reasons to believe, names, logos, and then kind of more communication type things as well. So activation ideas, ad sets, right through to promotional offers. So we've seen it work for all of those. And finally, to close on a lighter note, do you know these men? You probably recognize the man on the right. He, of course, is Simon Cowell, originator of the, certainly a star, one might say, star judge perhaps, on Pop Idol, as we call it in the United Kingdom, American Idol, as it is, of course, in the US. A very successful man, a very rich man, who perhaps sometimes lets it go to his head. On the left, though, you may or may not recognize this gentleman, Simon Fuller. Now, he is considerably richer than Simon Cowell. And why is that? Well, because, of course, he actually owns the format and the concept for Pop Idol, American Idol, and its many other iterations. So just to sort of share with you and taking a step further, you know, if you really want to make the we approach work for you, you know, ask yourself, what can I outsource via a Pop Idol or American Idol model? You know, we'd advise source the talent from the crowd, get it all in and sift through, screen it for potential using the crowd, but finally, do make sure, like Simon Fuller, that you own the output. So there we are. I hope it's been interesting. It's been a pleasure talking to you today about you know, a way that we can move from the often rather unreliable me research towards we research. And I think that I've got time to take a couple more questions before I sign off. So please do type those in. If we don't have time to get to all of them, don't worry, because we'll make sure that we come back to you with a response. And you're very welcome to email me in person as well. You can see my email address and my slightly eccentric job title here on the final slide. So Eddie, if you want to share with me a couple of questions that we've had in, please do.
Okay, let's have a quick look here. Bear with me. Yep. Okay. Here's quite an interesting one. So we've covered off that predictive markets is a good technique for separating the wheat from the chaff, and you know, we have a normable benchmark from that initial sorting exercise. But is there any value in putting in an existing product as a benchmark? What's the view on that, Will?
That's a very good question. I mean, we do see clients who ask to put a benchmark product into the test to sort of get an understanding of where the other products being tested sit in relation to something that they sort of know and understand the performance of. So, you know, very happy to do that. I think we've reached a point now over the years that we've been conducting this, that because we've been able to establish a norm for how much people will say of any given concept, yes, I'd probably buy shares in this concept because I think it's likely to succeed in market. We've been able to build up a norm on that basis, so that now gives us the ability to say, you know, not just within the concepts you tested, the crowd has picked out concept 3, concept 8, and concept 9 as the ones that should be progressed. We can now also say, let's have a look and just check that, you know, those concepts are overall, in the grand scheme of things and other concepts that we test, that those concepts are actually, you know, ones that that perform well in a contextual sense. So, you know, there's less call for a benchmark these days. You know, if a client really wants to test one, then obviously, you know, we're happy to do so.
Thanks, Will. And just to kind of preempt a question, I saw something similar earlier, but we have this normative database, and obviously we've used predictive markets to test a large variety of different things. Presumably there's quite a bit of variation in the norm. So what do we do there? Do we filter accordingly to sort of category, and indeed, you know, if you think about different countries and the way that perhaps culturally we in the UK sort of answer scales versus you know, Latin America, where perhaps the reaction to concepts is sort of much higher, much more positive.
Yeah, thanks for that. The interesting thing that we see, and I think it's something about the way that we're using the crowd as investors to make a prediction about the market is that we actually see much less variation with the predictive market approach in terms of the norms, both for category and between different countries, than we've seen in our concept testing norms. So in our food norm for traditional concept testing, there's actually a quite remarkable range of 44%, 44 percentage points difference in the top two box purchase intention between the lowest scoring country and the highest. By contrast, again, looking across a wide range of markets, which includes Central, South America, Australasia, and so on, by contrast, we actually see a range of only 10% in the probably buy shares in norm from the predictive market between different countries. And I guess it's fundamentally quite a confirmation, I suppose, of the difference between me research and we research. With the monadic testing, you're asking people as an individual, would you buy this? And in a very sort of passionate and emotional culture, like the kind of culture in Latin America, you will have 96% saying yes, yes, I will buy this product. And when it actually comes on the market, will 96% of consumers go out and buy this product? No, of course they won't. But that is an effect of asking the individual what they think they'll do. And, some of the clients that have come to us have been particularly excited about, covering off for sort of South America because they find it so difficult to make a decision between concepts because all the scores are so high. And I think when you look at the predictive market approach and the we research approach, well, because you're asking people to make a judgment, not as themselves, so they don't feel the need to please you and say yes, yes, yes. They make that judgment. They've got shares in the idea notionally, and therefore, you actually get a very accurate picture from the crowd of how those different ideas, or whatever it is you're testing, will perform in the market.
As well, so I guess that could potentially be summarised as, in typical market research, we always have to account for overclaim, don't we? As you quite rightly say, whether you're in Latin America where it's very sort of amplified, but even in the UK, if you're conducting a volumetric, you'd have to sort of downweight purchase intention scores to account for overclaim. And here, I suppose, it's quite nice to see that people acting as investors sort of take a step back and almost assess the underlying idea, and how successful that might be in market, rather than, sort of saying, yes, I'd probably buy that. That's very clear. Thanks very much.
Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for in terms of questions, but I think if there are any others that have come in, we shall be delighted to get back to you in person. Just remains for me to say thanks very much indeed for listening in. And if you want to talk more, my contact details are there, and look forward to carrying on the discussion. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.